Hey guys, let's talk about this Jeep build. So, just got done with the first wheeling trip in my new JKU project. I call it the Plain Jane Jeep. It's a 2017 copyright Jeep JKU. It is a sport. It is a very basic model. Crank windows, manual locks, all those things. Pretty simple. And I decided to start that way because I wanted something more than just a Rubicon. Rubicon's great, don't get me wrong, but there is a point where it's only going to have, a Dana 44 axle or a certain gearing, or in the transfer case, there is things there. And my approach with this one was to, I guess, start with a clean sheet of paper, a stock vehicle, unmodified, and build it exactly like I wanted. And so that's what I did. So we got a lot to talk about. I kind of drug my feet on this because I wanted to wait until I got a good wheeling trip, multi-day, some harder trails under my belt in this thing, because there's a lot of stuff on this thing that is different and I guess new. Some prototype stuff that I came up with, just a little bit different way to do things. And so I wanted to wait to talk about it till I had more miles on it that way. And as you can see, one of the biggest things is I'm driving it. I am not trailering this creation around. One of the things that I really wanted to do with this project was get back off the trailer. I just don't like trailering. I don't know why. It's not like I won't do it anymore at all. But for this vehicle, the main thought was to get it and make a nice driver that could also wheel fairly hard stuff reliably, go, 70, 80 miles an hour down the highway with the cruise control and get decent mileage and be quieter, comfortabler, hard top, AC, heater, all those things. So that was the main driver for this project, was to make more of kind of one vehicle that would do more things. I daily drive this. This is my kind of town runabout on, 1 tons and 40s. So, and then just trying to balance that level of capability, durability, usefulness to try and get, honestly, more back towards one vehicle I have to worry about. I'm not getting rid of my flat fender. I do enjoy having a pickup truck for certain things, but I really kind of like the idea of having one vehicle that would kind of do everything. If I could, wish something into existence, or if that's what I'm striving towards, or whatever, that's what I kind of want. And so just, me and my Jeep. So it doesn't have to be a Jeep, by the way, not that brand loyal. I don't even know where to start this. I didn't post a ton of stuff about building this. So, I probably got to walk you guys through the build quickly and talk about some of the details. This is going to be a long form video, guys. This is going to be a lot of talking head stuff. I'll try to intermix in, pictures and clips as we go, but yeah, I've got a 6.5 hour drive back home, about 400 miles from, I was just in Hurricane, Utah at Sand Mountain, Sand Hollow, wheeling. So driving back home. It's a sunny Sunday. Sorry about sunglasses, but started off with a fairly stock Jeep. My intention, at least for the meantime, is to use the stock engine and transmission. This is a V6 Pentastar 3.6. And this has the automatic transmission. It's a Mercedes-Benz designed 5-speed automatic that was then built under license for Jeep. It's the WA 580 in Mercedes speak and called a NAG 1 in Jeep speak. 5-speed, kind of the first of the wide ratio or wider ratio transmissions, automatic transmissions that we saw in Jeep Wranglers. Not as broad as the 8-speed, but still has a 3.6 first gear and a 0.85 overdrive. So that's what I had stock. Behind that, I decided to get rid of the stock transfer case, and it was a sport transfer case. I actually didn't mind the sport gearing much at all, and the reason why I can prove that is because I swapped in an Atlas transfer case that is only a 3-to-1 low range. So stock sport was 272. I went to a 3-to-1. So not very much change at all. I, didn't go for a very much deeper transfer case on purpose. I think you can go too low in the transfer case, and it affects the overall usefulness of the vehicle. It'll do one or two things better, but you give up 3 or 4 other things, where I'm trying to balance that as much as I can. And the gearing in the transfer case worked out really well. This whole week, that was everything from a mix. Sand Hollow has big sand dunes to play around in, and then really technical rock trails as well. And so I was able to test that theory out a lot, in that I was just able to leave it in low range all day. I didn't have to shift in and out of high to low. It would just, it'll go fast enough in low range for the sand, and then slow enough and controlled in the rocks. It is a really, really good combo. It's not what most people would do, but after this weekend testing everything, I wouldn't change anything that way at all. So Atlas transfer case, it's from a company called Advanced Adapters. It is a total replacement unit, gear drive. It also has twin stick shifting, and you can independently control the front and the rear axle. So you can do things like power only the front axle for what's called front dig, and that lets you basically like pivot the car quicker in certain instances, and drag the front end around, and that's very useful in something with the longer wheelbase like this. So that's to the transfer case. I'm gonna take a break for 1 second because I don't want to record all this at once, and this is about 10 minutes. So let me start and stop you again. So the one other thing on the transfer case that I really enjoyed was I did a special system for the twin stick transfer case levers to control the axle lockers. So this was just an add-on to the factory twin stick mechanism. They're a stock or a bolt-on to that system, but they have the locking diff buttons. The front locker is on the stick that controls the front axle. The rear button is on the stick that controls the rear axle. In my brain, that all turns out very logically. It's all in this space down right next to your leg. Everything is close. I can reach it while I'm belted in. If the seatbelt ends up being a little bit tight at a weird angle, I can still reach everything without having to swap, or loosen my seatbelt. So that worked out really well. I'm very happy with that modification. I'm still trying to get past the prototype phase on that, and maybe it's something I can offer through my little web store, brennans.garage.com, brennans-garage.com. Anyways, lots of neat stuff there. You should check it out. Anyways, so drive shafts are 1350 units front and back. You have to redo the drive shafts generally when you do the Atlas. And then that was also leading us into the big change in this, which is I replaced the front and the rear axles with Ultimate Dana 60s from Dana Spicer. It's their aftermarket division. And essentially it's a 1 ton, if you will, axle, front and rear. Rear is a low pinion Dana 60, 35 spline, full float axle, big 8-lug disc brakes, all that. The front is a high pinion 60 with 35 spline inner and outer axles. The axle shafts use a very large 1550 style axle joint, and also the 1 ton brakes in front. They're all, I think, 2014 to 2018 Dodge 2500, 3500 single rear wheel brakes. So very large brakes. They barely fit in a 17-inch wheel, but they do fit. And then both axles have locking differentials. These have the Eaton electric locking differential. And then the big other thing is I went against the grain, if you will, on axle gearing theory with this Jeep. And after running this Jeep stock for a little while, it had the very small 225 tires, the stock sport small tires that 16-inch wheels, the smallest tire you could pretty much get on this Jeep from the factory, but it was ordered with 373 axle gears. So one thing I noticed with that, so even with the best gearing or the deepest gearing you could get from the factory, this Jeep, the way it's programmed, will still go to third gear in mountain country on big hills. I don't think you could gear that out of happening no matter what you do because of how it acted stock with the 373s and the small tires. So what I did is these axles have 488 gears and I run a 40-inch tire. So most people, majority of people will tell you that probably should go with a 513 or a 538 gear. And after running this now, I've got a couple thousand highway miles on it, and wheeling, all that stuff. I am not wishing for anything different. I think these 48 gears were the right choice. This thing gets really good power on the highway. I can still use cruise control. It's not hunting around any more than it did stock, and it's not struggling. I mean, it is a V6, it is pushing 40s, yes, but in general, this thing's still perfectly good at driving on the highway. You know, it's 1 or 2 fingers on the wheel, and that's it. Why I think that is with this combination is this transmission has a fairly short overdrive. It's only 1 overdrive gear, and it's a 0.85 overdrive. So it really is tight between 5th and 4th. It's only about a 500 RPM shift, and this transmission actually does the 5th to 4th shift really well and helps it maintain on mild hills just like it did factory. Works pretty well. And then when it does go to 3rd, unfortunately, it is a bigger jump, and so I didn't want to gear it so deep that when it does that jump, that then it spikes the RPMs to like 4,000 plus to maintain highway speed, or at least close to it. I wanted to kind of keep in that sweet spot to where I could pull, you know, 3,500, maybe 37, approaching 4, but not over 4, and still be doing, you know, 60 miles an hour or a little more up hills. And with 40s in a V6, big hills, mountain passes, I live in Colorado, everything's high elevation. That just happens. You know, you're not going to be going 80 plus up those hills anyways. The speed limits are all 65. So, and then on regular, you know, roads, it just works. So definitely an odd choice. But if, you know, we don't learn anything new trying the same thing over and over again. So 488s are also going to be a little bit stronger. I think you get an extra tooth on the pinion compared to 538s. All those things. So very happy with that combo. Yeah, that was a good one. So next topic, going to talk about what I did to the axles. So these came from Dana Spicer, ready to bolt in, but I wanted to try something different I didn't want to go all the way to a long arm suspension lift, but I did want to run a 40-inch tire, and I think short arm, stock arm length Jeeps with more than, say, 2 inches, you start to get past that, kind of like 2, 3, 4 inches of lift range on short arms, and you start to get some pretty bad handling quirks. And honestly, I think even stock Jeeps have some handling quirks as well. So I wanted to kind of fix most of that. And so what I did was I came up with a prototype system idea. It's not exactly how I would do it if I was starting from completely scratch, because I had a set of axles. I had to work around the brackets that were there. I did not want to cut them all off. So what I did was I came up with a way to completely redo the pickup points for the upper and lower control arms on the axle to improve the suspension geometry. And the short version of that, and this is going to make it sound super easy and everybody's going to be like, oh, it's so easy, everybody's going to do it, you know, but is I essentially just raised all the control arm mounts on the axle side about 3 inches. That's not the actual number, but ballpark, that's what it is. And so that cancels out 3 inches of lift as far as the control arms are acting like, and flattens everything out, gets those lower control arms flat, and that really helps do things like lower the roll axis for the front and rear axles and makes the Jeep roll oversteer a lot less, gets the axles moving around a lot better. Everything improved, in my opinion, by doing that. I did have to change the lengths of the control arms slightly to get the packaging right, but I don't think anybody's going to run a 40-inch tire, 1-ton axles, and then just want to put stock control arms back on it. It would be neat, like, don't get me wrong, but having to run slightly different control arm lengths isn't the end of the world. So had to redo the control arm lengths, but these are all fairly easy to make things. I just ordered what I calculated the arm lengths as with aluminum links, and then just screw in joints. I used a joint by Metal Cloak. It is, I would say, the closest to a rebuildable OEM solution that's on the market. It does flex a little bit more, but they ride and they're quiet and they don't squeak so far, and all those things. So I was trying really to keep everything as stock as feeling, noise, harshness, vibrations, all those things, trying to keep those in mind and keep this being a fairly stock feeling Jeep to drive. Anybody can get in this and drive it. It's not special. There's no secret codes or anything. I guess, the Atlas shifters might throw a couple people off, but, other than that, it's fairly easy to drive and stock and makes sense, normal. But the axles with I call it lift corrected geometry, all that worked out really well. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to wait to do this video, was for to get some good off-road steep climbs, things that I think where you start to notice a stock Jeep suspension starting to act pretty funny. It starts to want to lift one tire. It feels hunched up. The suspension kind of feels locked up. So we ran a lot of trails and got on some really good steep obstacles, stuff that you couldn't just crawl, that you actually had to dynamic, roll through and use a little bit of momentum to get up. And this suspension is very well behaved. No bad characteristics, no front axle chatter in the sand or on steep climbs. The front just spins. It doesn't get violent and chatter, which is a really good balance of what's called anti-dive on the front suspension. And then the rear, when things spin, the rear doesn't bounce or hop. So a very nice anti-squat number in the rear suspension. And just balancing those out so the car always feels planted. It doesn't hop. It's not trying to break traction. It's loading the tire properly to get traction when it needs it. All those things worked out very well. Didn't notice anything quirky at all. It just, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but just works, and it works very well. And I was able to leave all the frame side pickup points for the suspension completely stock if somebody wanted to reproduce these axles. Hopefully, maybe now that I've done a prototype, a company will listen. I have been in contact with Dana Spicer a little bit. This would be a huge value added addition to any aftermarket bolt-in axle assembly like this. In essence, you could just take your stock axles out, bolt this in, and all your suspension geometry is much, much improved. It doesn't really cost anything extra. You got to do new brackets on the axle anyways. So, I don't know why anybody's not doing it. It works really well in the front because the lower arms are up slightly. You also get more ground clearance underneath the long axle tube because the link mount isn't hanging down, holding you up. The rear, because the shock mounts, you don't really gain a bunch of clearance. But if you wanted to take it one step further, maybe you could redo some of those mounts, but JKs are pretty limited with what you can do with the floor and stuff with the shocks. So that's kind of the axles. Pretty happy with all that stuff. Like it does feel good to have stronger axles than stock. I did one of the other paths for this vehicle when I was thinking about doing it was trying to go the bolt-on portal box route. But I still would love to try that when the technology maybe is matured a little bit. But I gotta say, having the 1-ton axles and that are basically running 1-ton truck parts, bearings and joints and ball joints and everything with a 40-inch tire does give me some reassurance and makes the Jeep feel burly, I guess, or stout, strong. So yeah, I think the way this is built works really well. And not saying you couldn't do one on portals that would work really well too, but I do think there is a lot more going on with portals that would make me personally a little more nervous. Not that I wouldn't do it, and not that I'm not interested in trying that, but what this Jeep ended up like, maybe more than I wanted, or it's how I wanted it. I just wanted a strong, durable, reliable vehicle. So reliable, I know, Jeep jokes, put them in the comments below. I'm sure there'll be lots. So yeah, that sums up the powertrain. So quick recap, stock engine so far. I am happier with that engine than I thought I would be. It's just the 3.6. It's still pretty stock. It is stock, I guess. I might have done a little bit on the air cleaner box to free up some flow or whatever. It does have a MagnaFlow Overlander something, extreme exhaust, whatever. Basically, it moved the muffler from behind the rear axle where you smash it all the time to kind of midships. And didn't have to worry about smashing on the muffler anymore. Frees up some clearance back there. Stock automatic, 5-speed works well. I like it. I don't think I would change it. I'm not interested in doing an 8-speed because of all the gearing stuff. I think the 8-speed with the double overdrive would change how you would have to approach the gearing theory. Atlas 2 transfer case, 3-to-1 ratio, and Dana 60 axles with 48 gears, E-lockers, and then 40-inch tires. I've ran many sets of Milestar Patagonia tires. These are the MT 02, the latest generation. Very impressed. Driving down the road, 65, 67 miles an hour, 2 fingers on the wheel, not overly noisy in here at all, except when it downshifts to third on the big hills, but that happens. But the tires performed really well for me. They always have. These are just the improved version, and I run them on a pretty unique wheel. It was kind of one of those just happen chance things. I wanted a special wheel set of these Hutchinson beadlock wheels that are a military surplus off of a General Flyer 72, super crazy little special forces, fit in the back of a helicopter airplane looking thing. But they had sweet wheels on them. I ended up with a set that was surplused, had them powder coated yellow, as a nod for the Be Safe Recovery Gear brand, make my plain white Jeep stand out a little bit. And but they are what's called a double beadlock wheel, so 2 halves, and they squish a liner in between them, so they hold both beads, so I don't have to worry about beadlock issues at all, inner or outer, so I can run any pressure I want, even being big and heavy like this, not having to worry about burping the inner bead with a traditional clamp style beadlock like I run on my other vehicles. So yeah, just something a little different. And that tire and wheel package, unfortunately, is pretty heavy. It is a 40, and then with the double beadlock, it's 147 pounds per corner. So that's kind of crazy. But with the big axles, everything seems to be working pretty well that way. They drive nice, air down well. Off-road traction was great. Looking forward to getting this into the winter. We're just getting there. It's if you're watching this video, it's kind of early October, middle October right now. So yeah. All right, back again after that short intermission where I filled in the gaps between 2 clips with who knows what yet, but hope you enjoyed it. Anyways, let's talk more about the suspension. I explained how I redid the link brackets on the axles to improve the suspension geometry, but that's only part of a lift, if you will. I still had to install taller springs, shocks, all that stuff. So I wanted this to sit pretty low for a 40-inch tire. This was a sport, so it was very low from the factory. It had a lot of rake, which is the rear end sitting up higher than the front. That was almost 2 inches, like 1 3/4 inches in this from the factory. I don't like that stance, so I wanted it to sit much more level. So I ended up running in the front. This has a Carly suspension linear rate spring. They listed as a 3-inch spring. I did end up installing a 1-inch spacer on top of that to get the front end to be the stance that I wanted. I think some of that is because it was a sport. Carly springs are a little bit softer. I am running a winch and a bumper in the front, so that extra weight is going to affect how the stance is. But in general, I would say this fits pretty low, or this sits pretty low for a 40-inch tire. I call it about a 3-inch lift, generally. I do have to run a 3-inch bump stop spacer in the front. That is to keep the everything. I don't know. A Dana 60 is big. The track bar, panhard bar, the factory or the bracket provided by Dana Spicer on the Ultimate 60 is raised to account for the raised drag link position. All that stuff requires a 3-inch bump stop spacer to keep it from crashing into the bottom of the frame. But that said, with the 3-inch spring, with the 1-inch spacer, the 3-inch bump stop spacer, I ended up with having about an inch more than stock up travel in front. I was able to maintain about 4.5 inches of up travel from ride height. I think that's a decent number. I would like 5 better. If I can find a spring that I like, Maybe I'll get a custom one made that would give me about a 1/2 inch more height in the front. I wouldn't be against that. But kind of working with the parts I had, stab in the dark, that's where I ended up. It does work pretty well. I'm happy with it. I'll just probably obsess over the details and continue to tune and refine it. But I think I got very close to what I wanted out of the gate. On the rear, I actually started with an experimental, if you will, rear spring setup. I tried to use call it a universal 5-inch OD coil. It fits in the top mount like stock. When I did the lower mounts, I designed them to accommodate that and be modular. And the idea was I could have a long linear rate rear spring of a known rate, so I could run the numbers on the total travel, the weight, where I wanted it to sit, and I could pick exactly the spring I needed. And that worked great for about a month. And then the springs sagged a lot. And I still don't know exactly why. I don't think they definitely didn't get to block height. They were a quality spring from a very well-known manufacturer. I'm not going to trash talk anybody. Maybe it was just something weird with the weight of how much weight they were, whatever. I don't know, but they didn't work. And the problem was the spring that I selected and the length that I needed was at one end of what they offered. And so I didn't have any stiffer options above the rate that I needed in that same length. So then I would have had to go to a 2-inch longer spring, which means I would have had more preload, but then I would have actually had even less rate. And so it's kind of like hitting a moving target, and I was kind of frustrated with it. And I just decided to buy the matching Carly rear spring, which they list as a 2.5 inch. It is a dual rate, which isn't my favorite, honestly. I kind of tend to like linear rate springs in shorter travel applications. Most OEM vehicles I've had in the past, with that I like it. But Carly, very well-known suspension company, they did a good job. They sit just about perfect match for the front. Good height. They haven't sagged at all that I can tell so far. They are a little bit stiffer than I would like, but I also run this thing pretty empty most of the time, especially like I try to keep my weight forward. And so, you know, there is something there. Yeah. So ended up with about a 3-inch lift, clear 40-inch tire. And how I did that and keeping it fairly low, one of the big helps was I moved the rear axle back about 2 inches. And so part of that was a function of the trying to maintain arm length with the lift corrected suspension geometry. And so essentially my starting point for that was I looked at the upper and lower control arm lengths, and I was actually able to just imagine flipping them over for lengths. And so the shorter upper arm ended up on the lower, and the longer lower arm ended up at the upper. They're pretty close in length anyways, but it was kind of a little bit of a gut check that I wasn't changing things a crazy amount. And when I did that, it happened to be where everything needed to end up, moved the axle back close to 2 inches. So that, in my opinion, really helps center the tire in the rear fender opening better than stock. Stock, I think, looks too far forward, and when you lift it with a short arm, it gets even more far forward. So moving that tire back really helped with getting the vehicle to sit lower with a lot less trimming. And I think that was the biggest help with getting it to sit, like clearing a 40-inch tire at a reasonably low lift height. I would look at moving the rear axle back on your Jeep if that's something that you want. TerraFlex actually makes a kit to do it with all the stuff you would need. I believe they marketed it originally on the 2-doors, but it would work on the 4-door. You do have to do some, you'd have to worry about the drive shaft and stuff like that. But overall, that was a really helpful modification. And then I am also running Nemesis Industries front and rear. I think they call it their Notorious aluminum fender flares. I really love the look of them. They have the compound lines that match the Jeep body better than most on the market. I think they look more like a stock flare, but with flare, if you would. And I think those help fit the tires at a much lower height as well. And then in the front, I am running their inner fender liner. The rear, I am not running a liner. And yeah, on the rear, I did have to trim. Basically, the Notorious flare has a... Let this guy go by. He's in a hurry. Pushing it a little close there, trucker. Anywho, so where was I? Yeah, fender flares fitting. The rear flares have the part that bolts to the body is a larger opening than stock, and it gives you a good guideline for trimming the rear section of the flare out. That was pretty painless and easy, and helps fit the big 40-inch tire. With the axle moved back, I am very, very, very close to, or I was very, very close to not having to trim the forward pinch weld at all. But after going on the wheeling trip, getting everything all twisted up, I am going to probably have to take about a 1/4 inch off of that pinch weld. Just to, it rubs lightly, but it's like when it's crossed up. So not when both of them bump up and down, but when one's up and one's down, it swings the tire a little bit one way or the other, and so it rubs. Yeah, but overall, pretty light trimming, pretty manageable. In the front, you definitely have some rubbing at the rear of the flare where it comes down at the bottom corner. I definitely am too close there and gonna have to trim a little bit more. But all in all, for trying to stuff a 40-inch tire and a reasonable lift height and that kind of stuff, I did, I think, push the front axle forward about a 1/2 inch from stock to help with that. But, it's just the little things you got to do once you really, start getting things moving around and whatever. So yeah, again, in the back, so front 3-inch bump stop spacer, rear about a 3-inch bump stop spacer as well, just to kind of cancel out the 3 inches of lift. The rear has about 4.5 inches of up travel also. I wouldn't mind a little bit more travel, but with the lift height and everything, in the rear especially, I had to work around the with moving the axle back, I left the frame side of the track bar bracket in the stock location, but I moved the axle side bracket forward and then made a track bar that went around the differential to try and limit modifications to the frame and packaging and shocks and everything else. It just gets kind of tight. So it works better than fine. It works good. There is room for a little bit of tweaking there. And then that brings us to shocks. So again, didn't want to really modify the frame side of the vehicle much. So I wanted a fairly bolt-in shock solution. And I ended up starting with a set of Fox 2.5-inch internal bypass remote reservoir shocks with their DSC adjuster. They were a used set. One of them was damaged. I ended up sending them to Desert Speed Shock Tuning here actually in Utah, up by Price. I believe he's a helper. Matt, great guy, really likes to talk the talk, do stuff. So I sent them to him to be reworked to get a baseline so we knew what all the valving and the bypass ports were going to be. Kind of gave him an idea of where the bump range needed to be. And I think for a remote first stab at tuning, pretty darn good. I definitely will spend more time and I want to go up and have Matt tune it in person. I am fighting a couple little, with a build this big, I am still fighting a couple little thunks and clunks here and there. So some of those maybe the shocks, these shocks have a rod end, a hard metal suspension joint on one end. And so I'm kind of, even though they're new, I'm wondering if they don't contribute to that thunky noise every once in a while that I get. It seems to be kind of speed or frequency specific. The shocks do really well in the bumpy stuff. I can really feel the bypass kick in and kind of with somewhat limited travel, slow things down when getting a little bit too hot. But I think there's still more left in the shocks that I want to investigate. Shocks, once you get into that world, kind of addictive, or at least for me, it's one of those things that's really interesting. Sadly, don't have the time to really learn everything myself yet. So, I've used AccuTune Off-Road in the past. Matt was a great resource at Desert Speed Shock Tuning. But man, if you really want to improve your vehicle and make it more fun, it's hard to beat a good set of shocks, in my opinion. So I never really paid much attention to that, but the more I play with that, the more I mess with it, the more I like it. So yeah, nice shock package on this. I will probably, at least go one more round of in-person tuning and stuff. But I'm not completely stuck on the Fox shocks. I do have my eye on some new technology from Bill Stein. That's their zone control stuff. Essentially, it's like a bypass shock. It's still an internal bypass, but it's kind of inverted, if you will, in that the main piston is full diameter, and then it has the bump zones at the top and the bottom built into the shock as additional valving that only engages in those zones. So it's kind of the opposite of a Fox internal bypass. But a lot of people are saying pretty good things about those, but they don't make them for Jeeps yet. So, but that is one thing I really do enjoy, is a nice Nice handling suspension that can carry a little bit of speed. I'm not looking for a desert truck or anything or pre-runner type thing, but you know, being able to not have to worry about crashing on the bump stops all the time is nice. That does bring up one other thing. This is still running 3-inch bump stop spacer and stock foam bump stops, and honestly, they do a pretty good job, better than I thought they would actually. But I do think having a little bit more bump stop would help. I don't think I want to go to a air bump style, nitrogen bump stop yet. I think with the limited up travel and limited overall travel, that the noise from engaging the nylon pad on the bump stop air bump would be a little bit annoying. So I reached out to Perry Parts, a new company that's doing a lot of work in what would be the term, isomer or polymer bump stops. They actually invented some of their own really cool 3D printing technology, pellet extruders, all kinds of really neat stuff. But they are doing some upper end, I would call it, direct swap replacement bump stops. I actually have a set sitting at home that I didn't quite get to install, but I am really looking forward to that after this trip. I think it'll just give it that a little bit more bottoming resistance, and then, you know, some more shock tuning, and I think this thing's just going to be great. I did, because of the investment in shocks, good shocks, not cheap, I did end up installing front and rear limit straps on this to protect the shock when the suspension drops out completely. And honestly, that was a pretty big improvement in general, I think, for how the suspension feels on the, whatever you want to call it, top out, when the shock's all the way extended. The limiting strap, if they're set correctly, and I think I got pretty close, they kind of catch the axle, if you will, on extension, and you don't get that harsh top out jar sometimes that's typical if you don't have limit straps. And, you know, didn't notice any decrease in travel per se, you know, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so the last part about the suspension, I think that's a little bit different than normal is because I moved the rear axle back, I was kind of forced into running a different sway bar setup. So I put a slightly modified version of a Curry anti-rock rear sway bar. I had to run shorter arms, and I ran a 1-inch bar in the back. That was just packaging reasons. All that seems to work pretty well. And then in the front, I also run a 1-inch Curry anti-rock, which is their, I think, their stiff bar option. It's still, I would say, slightly lighter than the stock sway bar, but longer arms, more travel. And then I also have a set of air links from Apex on that are essentially a small air ram that you can change the pressure in, that you can tune the sway bar rate a little bit. And overall, that combo has been a really good all-around setup. Like, the whole wheeling trip in Sand Hollow, I did not feel the need to change the pressure in the air links. I just left it at, I think they run 200 now, is the number that I kind of tested and came up with the feel that I like. and they do move a little bit at max compression, but they're also, because the air volume in them is so small, they're also progressive. And so it kind of gives the sway bar a little bit of a unique feel where you can dial out certain characteristics. One of them is what I call head toss, is when you go through a diagonal feature where typically the Jeep would toss you from head to side as it goes through. I can dial some of that out with the air links and make it stay more level. But overall, just a really good sway bar setup where I don't have to change anything so far. I can tune it and I can find what I like, but I don't even have to do, I didn't even have to change the air pressure in the air links going all the way into 8 trails. So like big flexy stuff, didn't find the need. The 1-inch front sway bar, even though it's stiffer, still worked great. The 1-inch rear bar worked great. On the rear bar, I did have the upper joint at the sway bar arm was loose and gave me a clunk, and so maybe I just didn't get it tight enough. Maybe it's getting torqued on a little bit or something. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. I may build a slightly different set of rear sway bar link arms that are a different diameter or size to change the angle of the bar. But other than that, really happy with the suspension in general. So yeah, that gets us through suspension, and I need another drink of water. All right, back at this. Stopped in Kanab, got some chocolate donuts and orange juice. Voice is feeling a little better. I'm not used to talking this much, especially to myself or to you guys. You know, I mean, a lot to tell. And the reason why I do these videos or things like this is I'm just trying to pass on some knowledge. Like, I'm not saying everything I'm saying is gospel or whatever, but I'm trying to share what I know with you guys, and hopefully you can get something out of it. Hopefully it, you know, I don't care if you build a new Jeep or not. I never thought I would build a new Jeep, but here I am. But I hope this gets ideas going in your head, and you can apply that to whatever vehicle you want to go out and explore with. And so we kind of got done talking about suspension, and I think next we'll talk kind of about the exterior modifications and wrap up with some, you know, general theory. Maybe we'll get to things I want to do better or change, that kind of stuff. Easiest place to start is what's on the front of this thing, and that's a bumper. And it's a bumper that I designed. I did a pretty lengthy video about it. I will try and post up a link to that. I don't know if I can do the finger pointing link thing yet, but it is on this channel. It's pretty easy to find, and all that stuff. But it is a pretty small kind of stubby bumper. And it was a design that I came up with, a little bit different in that it is a combination bumper and winch mount in one piece, a lot lighter and more efficient than most designs on the market. Not something that I'm currently gonna sell or anything. It was just something that I wanted to do. If you got to have one, reach out. You know, I'm always up for semi-custom projects, and now that I've built this one, you know, building another one wouldn't be that hard. It's just those are really hard products for me to scale. So, you know, I'm not having 100 of those built at once. I'm, you know, shipping them is a pain for me. All those things, but anyways, there's a bumper. It has a very nice winch in it. That is one thing I can comment on now. So I wanted, originally when I was going to build this vehicle, I was going to do a classic winch. So like an upright Warren 8274, or now even the, you know, like the giggle pin version of that, that's all aftermarket. But when I got measuring and looking at the packaging, I just didn't want the front end sticking out any more than it had to. And to get an 8274 on, I would have had to make some compromises that way. So I decided to do something different and new, and we don't see in the States that much, is I ordered a winch from a company in the UK called Good Winch. They reproduce a design that is similar to some of the old Super Winch products in their low profile line. There are other companies that do the same thing now. Come Up Winch has some similar stuff. Carbon Winch out of Australia. And there's even some parallels to like the Runva winches out of Australia also. But anyways, it's a low profile winch. I got a version that is a little bit of a hot rod. I like classic winches because they are fast. They hold a lot of cable or line, whatever your preference is. And I wanted all that performance in a low profile package. And they were one of the only companies I could find that could do that. So this winch is what they call a 9.5 TDS winch. And this one is their large drum version. So this one will hold 150 feet of 3/8 synthetic line. I think they also spec it out for 125 feet of 7/16. So lots of line, lots of reach. I like that on my winches. Some people do, some people don't. This winch has a 7 horsepower, 6.8, 7 horsepower bow 2 motor on it. And with the gearing and everything that is in it, it will do over 60 feet a minute, which is comparable to a Warren 8274 in a low profile package with the motor upgrade. First wrap performance, they say it will do nearly 11,000 pounds of pull. So more than happy with that for something this size and weight. I think it's a really good sweet spot. I did get to use it twice on this trip, and everything that I wanted was validated. It is fast. It is, you know, it's really nice to be able to keep up with the vehicle. Line reach was great. I run what I call a soft hook setup on the winch line, so bit different than we see lately. It's something I came up with a couple years ago. I'll have to do a video on that separately, but was great validation on it being a useful way to rig a winch. I have a wireless controller rigged up to it. I find that very, very handy. The free spool on this winch is noteworthy as well. It is much, much smoother and easier to pull line off this winch than most any winch I've had ever. Very, very good and much, much better than a stock Warren 8274. or even the Bellevue, the earlier winches. The Bellevue has a little bit better free spool than the 8274. I think the 8274 actually has a terrible free spool. Most people say just power out, but anyways, this winch, the good winch, has a great free spool for getting line off. I really do like that. So that's the winch and the bumper, and I have a pair of prototype recovery points on the front of the bumper. They're also powder coated in yellow as the accent color of the vehicle. We talked about the Nemesis Notorious fender flares, and then I also run Nemesis. I think they call it their Billy rocker. It is an aluminum rocker guard. It is a 3-piece unit. I have the I would say the body panel that goes around the doors powder coated to match the white body color of the Jeep, and that really mellows them out in how they look on the vehicle, in my opinion, and I like that. And then the lower portion is black. I can say that aluminum rocker guards on a JK, these are heavy vehicles. It is a compromise. I did have, while I think the Billy rocker design is really good with sideways impacts and pivoting, of course they're going to get scratched and all that stuff. That's just something that rocker guards are, that's what happens. But I will say that I had a couple hits on the passenger side that were very much from the bottom, kind of, upwards into that bottom panel, and they were not as durable as I would like in that regard. I do think it's a good quality rocker. I do think I'm not going to change them, but that is a limitation with them. And I think as a consequence of that, I will have to replace the outer shell of them. It's a 3-piece design, and so the outer shell is designed, and you can buy them as a replacement part. They aren't hard to swap out necessarily, and that'll just be something I'll have to do every couple years, probably, depending on how hard I use this thing. Maybe I learn how to drive around that a little bit. Maybe I can talk Nemesis into making me a little bit different shape, or maybe up the thickness on the material slightly. But for this thing, it's a JK. They are heavy. To put a number to it, this is just over 6,000 pounds built. So I really don't think there's that many JKs that are on tons and 40s that are lighter than that. I ran a lot of aluminum parts. I don't run a lot of extra stuff. So it just is what it is. But anyways, other than that, the rockers, I actually really like them. Their look, their shape, function is good. It's just, it's a big, heavy vehicle, and rocker guards are gonna get dented unless they're completely crazy overkill. And I just didn't want to go the overkill route with like weld-on rockers. That just wasn't what I was going for with this. So other than that, the aluminum Billy rockers are really nice, and I will continue to run them. If I could tweak them a little bit, I would improve on them slightly. Again, also running the aluminum rear fender flares. I did manage to tag one of those ever so slightly, and so it's got a little beauty mark on it now. Trying to limit that to a degree. This is not a buggy. This was never designed to be a buggy. For sand hollow classifications, like if this is running 7 or 8 trails, that's what it was designed to do. That's kind of where the sweet spot is, I think. And it is just what it is. So, you know, I'm not trying to destroy this thing or anything. Anyways, rear fender flares. So rear bumper was actually a really fun project. I had a vision in my head, what I wanted for a bumper. It was supposed to be just a simple tube bumper. But when you start looking at a JK and how all the body panels are curved, they're, you know, it's a Jeep, it's supposed to be simple and easy and flat. It's not. Everything on a JK has a little bit of curve to it. So making the rear bumper match all those curves and getting the proportions right and everything was very challenging. But I think it turned out sweet. The clearance and the protection was really, really good. I only hit the bottom corners of the bumper ever so slightly a couple times. That's just what a bumper's supposed to do, right? So can't really complain about that. Rear bumper I really, really like. I did the same recovery points on the rear bumper as well. It is a frame chop style bumper, so it's moved up and tucked close to match the body. I do not run a spare tire on the rear of the vehicle. It's kind of one of my pet peeves. You can see, I think, maybe, I don't know. Anyways, spare tire's right here. And I run just a spare tire, and then I use the inside of the tire as storage. For me, that's a really good balance of qualities. Some people disagree with that, but you know, got to try something different. So the way that works is it's 40% rear seat delete plate that bolts in, gives me some storage underneath where the seat would have been when it was folded down. The tire straps on top of that, or sits on top of that vertical behind the driver's seat. I can barely see it in my rear view mirror. I call it the invisible spare tire. For me, it's the best location I've found for a tire of this size that doesn't get in the way of everything else too much. I want to be able to sleep in the back of this, and that's why I ended up doing the tire vertical, is I can sleep on the passenger or the floor. I can still use it to haul packages to the post office. And then the 60% seat still there, still flips up and down. And so it makes a great 3-seater when I need it, or a poor 4-seater for some reason if I need 4 seats. And if it, for some reason, I just had to have the rear seat, I can still bolt it in the 40% section. But for how I use this vehicle, I don't need that. So that's kind of the around the perimeter stuff. Nothing on the tailgate per se. I did do some more hide replacement tailgate hinges, and they kind of form what I'm calling like a small exterior modular rack. So like for this trip, I built a sand flag mount that went on there, because you got to have a flag in the dunes. And then I can see that same area being used for like a gas can mount, chainsaw mount, specific for certain trips. I can add on something there. And then, you know, of course, went through and relocated the license plate, delete plate on the tailgate, cleaned it all up, reverse lights for the license plate. Third brake light was relocated to the top of the delete plate. All that stuff is very clean and factory looking, and I really like that. And I like the back of the Jeep being minimal and light as possible, keeping as much weight forward as I can. Like I said, this thing is about 6,000 pounds, just a hair over, but it is also about 300 or 400 pounds, depending or not what I'm in it and stuff like that. But it is about 300 pounds or more front heavy. So that really helps how it climbs. And I like that. So I can still load it up for a trip and still have it be close to 50-50, like a big trip camping for a week, and still have it be 50-50. I try and keep all the weight I can forward. So the other piece of the armor, one thing that I will give, that I really liked and appreciated over the last week trip. So I did a full belly pan system by, hold on, now I have to think of the name. Next Venture Motorsports, sorry. Next Venture Motorsports, aluminum belly pan system, with their ultra high molecular weight polyethylene slider. So it's plastic, very slippery plastic on the bottom of the skid plate. And I can say I usually run aluminum skid plates on vehicles just for the weight savings. Adding the plastic made them much more slippery. And so there was many times over the last couple days of wheeling that I would rub on the belly, but I could pull the vehicle through on the plastic because it was slippery, and it was a noticeable difference in feel. And it was also much quieter when it did hit, and wasn't so jarring, all those things. So really impressed with that. This vehicle does sit a little low, so having all that was good. And this system is one of the only ones on the market. I think there are one or two other ones now, perhaps, but it is one of the only versions I've seen that totally replaces the gas tank skid plate. It doesn't sandwich on top of the stock steel, so you gain back a decent amount of clearance. And it was just a great system. It feels, it's aluminum, so it's not quite as strong as steel, but it's much lighter. Again, with this thing being heavy, you got to watch that stuff, or else it could be 7,000 pounds. I don't know. So, I mean, this has a lot of aluminum on it, and it's still heavy. So keep that in mind in your build. Is like, oh, well, I'll just do this in steel and that in steel and the other things in steel. And, I do think it adds up. So I think that covers all the exterior modifications. The outside of this thing is pretty simple and clean. I don't run a lot of stuff. I'm not a big aftermarket light person. I just did pretty much all my vehicles, majority of my vehicles, just get Hella H4 Euro glass headlights, and then upgraded H4 bulbs. I really like that light profile. It's mellower. It's a lower Kelvin light, and is much easier on my eyes at night. I don't like LED headlights typically because they're too white, blue light, that 5,000 to 6,000 Kelvin color. I like 3,000 to 4,000. So, and for me, for how I use it, they seem to be plenty bright. I think the lows are better than the factory highs were, and then the highs are quite nice. So yeah, not a lot of extra lights and stuff. Other modifications, I did do a dual battery tray in this from Genesis. I just bought the tray. I just did dual Group 34 AGM batteries in parallel, nothing fancy, just more battery capacity for the big winch, and newer vehicles are a lot more picky when it comes to low voltage. So trying to keep the voltage up on the batteries during winching and stuff like that. So the dual batteries, I think, help that. I do have also another trick or whatever. The newer 3.6 engines from the JL and JT they had more electrical demands, and so instead of a 160 amp alternator like the JK got, you can get a 240 amp alternator from the JT or JL that basically just bolts in. You do have to run a larger charge wire, but other than that, is a direct OEM part swap. So I have one of those that I need to stick in. And I think that'll help out if I ever do need to do a lot more heavy winching, that kind of stuff. And just kind of nice, upgrade since it's an OEM part. To do, so these axles came with the big brakes from the Dodge 3/4 ton, 1 ton trucks. And so Mopar has a upgraded booster and master cylinder that's larger that you're supposed to do with this. So with these axles, so I did do that. The brakes do seem, I would say, good, not great. It's extremely cramped in the engine compartment with the ABS module and everything in front of the master cylinder. So I think they were a little limited on the size of the master cylinder. And so the pedal ends up with a bit more travel than most people would like or are used to in new vehicles. So, but I did do that upgraded. It does work good, just not great. So, but I mean, the brakes, they seem to stop well. It's just, it requires more pedal travel than I would like. So that typically means a slightly smaller master cylinder than it should have. And looking at the numbers for what the master cylinder was for the Dodge Ram versus what they provided and everything, that kind of checks out. So I think they just ran out of space. Yeah, inside's pretty clean and simple. I do have this JKU radio. I do really like that. That worked great all week talking to the guys. This pancake style biscuit antenna that I found that I just mounted to the cowl worked really well, actually, for how small it is and unobtrusive. I mean, it just almost looks like a GPS antenna puck. So, and it's just an NMO mount, so I can change it out without any tools if I need a specialty antenna for something else, like if I want to be on 2 meter or try and get a repeater or something like that. I have that option. But other than that, I made this magnetic mount that's, really easy to use and simple, and you don't have to look and clip and all that stuff. And that was based off of a upgraded grab bar from Bulletproof. And then I made a little ram ball mount for it. And phone mount that's modular. Again, poverty Jeep, so the dash has no window switches in it. So I was able to use that pocket in the dash to make a mount for my phone. And then I have another mount that swaps on that's an 8-inch tablet, so I can run GPS software on it. And I also run JScan on the tablet too. which is a program that can talk to the Jeep computers and stuff. And yeah, I like this Jeep. I mean, I never thought I would really be a new Jeep guy if it were, and I do enjoy building and learning how to build different vehicles and stuff like that. But man, this thing works really well. Overall, it goes down the road really nice, not fatiguing to drive long distances. I did 400 miles out here. I'm going to drive 400 miles back home. The mileage has been really, really good for pushing a 40-inch tire, in my opinion. So on the way out, I fill up at about 200 miles because I like to get snacks. But both tanks were over 17 miles to the gallon, 17 and a half and 18 on the way out. And I'll edit in what the figures were going back the other direction, but I suspect they'll be very similar. And for me, with a vehicle that has cruise control, the AC going, and is low drama to drive, it's quiet enough in here you guys can hear me talking on the camera, and it's relatively quiet with the tires and the wind noise and everything. I couldn't be happier with that part of it. This is a vehicle that I feel like I could jump in and go drive it anywhere in the country without any special accommodations, if you will. Shouldn't require any extra time. It goes highway speeds well, cruise control. I mean, like I said, I'm actually more impressed with the V6 engine than I thought I would be, honestly, for pushing a 40-inch tire around. I do think my gearing strategy helps a little bit, but I mean, to get mid upper teens for mileage pushing a 40-inch tire at highway speeds, I have no complaints. It worked well off-road. Low range was good. I don't, even in the sand was super fun. And, there is an upper speed limit, of course, but I mean, how fast do you really need to go? This thing will do 30, 40 in low range without too much trouble. That's pretty fast and bumpy stuff for most people. I will comment, and I might give you guys a break because I think I just hit the 30-minute mark on this section of the video. So got some fuel in Shanto, which is like the exact halfway point, and now there's a bunch of people parking in places they shouldn't be, so getting out of here is going to be super not fun. Man, what a pain. It's like a busy little gas station. Oh my God, seriously, dude. Oh boy. I should show you what I'm going through here. This is the kind of stuff that there's no way that guy's getting through what I just went through on the other side. And hopefully I can get through, because he's gonna have to back up or something weird or whatever. Get me out of here. Too many people. Sorry about the hand, guys. Okay. Try this again. So, stopped. Got some fuel. Got like a little over 15 miles to the gallon on that tank. It was kind of a little bit windy, and I was trying some different things with the gearing and trying to force fourth gear instead of third gear to try and manage what I wanted to talk about next. And that is probably the only currently real downside to the 3.6 engine in this Jeep is temperature management. So the cooling system is all stock like, I guess. I did do, right after I bought it, it had about, I think it had 80,000 miles on it when I bought it. I've put on a decent amount of miles. It's almost at 90 now. And I did have, still when it was stock, bone stock, before the any modifications really, I did have a thermostat stick and only open partially, and so that was causing it to run pretty hot. And replaced the thermostat, the problem went away. But in general, these 3.6 engines, because they, in my opinion, because they have the exhaust manifold integrated into the head to help fit it, you know, the double overhead cam and everything into this engine bay, that integrated exhaust manifold pumps a ton of heat into the cooling system. And so while this vehicle has, in my opinion, actually better power than I thought it was going to, and overall, I don't really think I have to change the engine with the way it sits currently. Not saying that it won't get, you know, a little baby Hemi in the future or something, especially if I was to have problems with this 3.6 engine, you know, heaven forbid it was to break or something like that. I actually think this 3.6 is working pretty well. It's returning pretty good mileage. The power is decent. Off-road it works great. In the sand it was fine. So I'm not in a hurry to change it for something else. That said, it is thermally limited. So if you run this thing at like 4,000 RPM up a big hill, a mountain pass, and you try to maintain, you know, 65 miles an hour and you're at 4,000 or over, it will heat soak the cooling system. You could have the coolant temperature pulled up and you can just watch it climb until it gets to an uncomfortable point, and they run these things pretty darn hot to begin with. So you don't have a whole bunch of margin, in my opinion, and you eventually will have to back out of it. It's not that the motor doesn't have enough power. It's just that you can't really access all that power for a continuous or unlimited amount of time. And to get to that power, you have to be quite high in the RPM range. I mean, the red line on this engine is 6,500, I think, or something like that. So if it starts having cooling issues at 4, you're leaving 2,500 RPM of usable power off the table, really, for longer durations of time. Do you really have all that power in the first place? You know, if it's only like intermittent use or whatever. So I do think I will look at doing a couple things with this cooling system to increase its capacity a little bit. I was very careful when I built the front bumper and all that stuff to keep the front bumper as clear, or the grill as clear as possible. I don't have lights, I don't have a winch sticking out in the airflow or any of that. So it's getting good airflow into the grill, into the radiator, I believe. But this is an automatic. It does have air conditioning, so there is, you know, coolers in front of the radiator for the transmission and the AC condenser. So that's going to have an effect. And the combination of all that is the cooling system in this is, I would say, marginal. I won't even call it good. It's just marginal. And that's a bummer, because everything else is working really well. And if you, for those short bursts that you can use the power before it gets too hot, it's fine. So what I'm going to probably do is 2 major things, other than just maintenance and making sure everything is working like it should, which I believe it is I am going to I want to get the engine computer unlocked. That will let me adjust the fan settings. These run a pretty hot thermostat, so it's a 203, I believe, thermostat. And the fans don't really start kicking on until like 215 is when the fan starts ramping up. It's a pulse width modulated fan, so variable speed. It starts ramping up at like 215, which is way too late in my opinion. And then it doesn't even get to full flow on the fan until 230. So I want to scale that back a lot and give the cooling system more time. I don't think that'll prevent all the issues, but it'll definitely help. So that's one thing I want to do. Second thing I want to do is I think I need to look at a radiator that is just bigger, better, whatever. And so the one that seems to be on the top of most people's lists is the Mishimoto. The version 2 of the Mishimoto radiator is supposed to be like a 15-20% increase in cooling capacity. It's big aluminum radiator. It does fit in the stock location, and you can go back and forth. If you were to have a problem, you know, on a big trip and the only thing you could find was a stock radiator, you could put a stock radiator back in it. But that Mishimoto radiator is something I'm going to look at as an upgrade. Beyond that, pretty happy with how the engine is working, the mileage that it's getting, you know, middle teens and up for, you know, pushing a 40-inch tire around with a brick. Aerodynamics, I'm really quite happy with that. That's fine. That's what I was actually expecting more like 12 or 13. So to get like 15, 17, 18, and whatever this last tank will be, pretty happy with that. So that is, the cooling is really the only problem that I have so far. I will say there was a challenge doing the steering on this vehicle. It was, I think, because I made so many big changes at once that I kind of lost my baseline a little bit. and I did a lot of things that were kind of different with the suspension geometry and how all that got corrected that may have caused a quirk or two in the steering. So one of the things I noticed with the steering in this, and one of the reasons why I redid the suspension geometry in general, was to get rid of roll oversteer. So Jeep JK stock suspensions and lifted short arm suspensions, and I will go as far to say as a lot of aftermarket long arm suspensions still have lots of roll oversteer. So what that means is the Jeep becomes very sensitive to outside forces, so crosswinds, road, crown undulations, things like that. The Jeep will feel kind of like you're driving on a beach ball. So it's overly sensitive to outside influences, and it's also overly sensitive to steering wheel input. And so it feels like you're driving on a beach ball is the best way to explain it. You're constantly making corrections. Where when I did this, I flattened out all the roll axis in it with the way the suspension geometry was redone. And the quirk is it became almost undersensitive to steering wheel input. And that led to a weird phenomenon where it became a little bit sensitive to, it's not bump steer, it is steering feedback from the tire to the wheel being different than the amount of feedback you get from the wheel to the tire, if that makes sense. This is still very much in a, I kind of think I know what's going on, but it is something different that I had not seen in a build before. It's not necessarily bad at all. As you can see, I am always driving this with one or two, fingers on the wheel. It's not bad. It's just that it was so different that I had to do a completely different style of alignment, which is where things went pretty far off the off what all the experts would tell you. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't share a ton of this during the first about 1,000 miles of test driving, is because I was learning about this steering. And that bump feedback issue, not bump steer, it's just how the bumps on one side or the other react back through the steering wheel. And this is a really big tire, really heavy tire. I'm running a wheel with a lot of offset to keep the width conservative. And then the suspension geometry changes, and all those things. I purposefully tried to avoid adding hydraulic assist, which I think would actually patch over a lot of these quirks. But what I found was, I would say 99% of vehicles out there respond and are set up with the suspension and the tires being what's called toe in. So the tires are slightly towed in at the front, and that's where they drive the best. This vehicle, for some reason, and I think it has to do with that roll axis slope being flat and almost negative at times, that this vehicle actually seems to need and require a little tiny bit of toe out. And it's not much, but the difference between doing a typical, 0.2 degree toe in, 3/16 or a quarter toe in, made this very, very sensitive to steering feedback. It would still drive fine and feel fine. It was just that you were getting a lot of feedback through the steering wheel. And like I said, hydraulic assist could patch over some of that. I have a very good steering stabilizer on this. It's a nice Fox brand new through shaft. It was one of the only ones that really fit in the package that I had. I would say the valving on that steering stabilizer is still probably a little bit light. I couldn't fit the one with the adjustable valving in this install very easily, so I may actually talk to Desert Speed Shock Tuning and see if they can revalve the steering stabilizer a little bit, just to give it a little bit more damping on the steering stabilizer. But the difference between a little bit toe in and a little bit, or I would say traditionally toe in and just a little bit of toe out, made, as soon as I decided to try a little bit of toe out, and there really wasn't a lot of information out there on doing that. I mean, very, very, very few vehicles require toe out. I found a couple references here and there, but not, I don't think it's a common thing. It has to be something with just how all the little things stacked up. But toe out is supposed to be like, make the steering ultra sensitive. This one's not ultra sensitive. It's still actually quite, it requires, I won't say heavy steering wheel input, but it's not light. It feels like you need firm steering wheel input. It's not darty on the highway. It doesn't try and track weird or anything like that. It requires very few corrections. Yeah, so that took quite a bit of time in my brain to get that all figured out and to make positive gains there. And then once I did make positive gains there, I decided to finally install an upgraded steering box for more power, specifically on the trail. I am trying to avoid hydraulic assist because I don't like some of the feel on the road from hydraulic assist. So what I ended up doing was a PSC big bore, big sector shaft box for the Jeep JK. They make their own in-house custom manufactured steering box. And that has been really, really good. I am on the most basic install of that, just a direct box swap. No upgraded pump yet, no upgraded anything else. I did, however, buy the ported box just in case I want to upgrade to hydraulic assist in the future for some reason, or potentially if somebody buys this, they're future-proofed that way. But just spent, 3-4 days in Sand Hollow, wheeling a bunch of trails, and I think the steering is quite good. Is it as powerful as assist? No, but the difference in the bore size in the box is basically the same steering force as adding a 1.5-inch hydraulic assist ram to a stock box. So that's about the level of power that I have. You can get it bound up if both lockers are on, you're in the middle of a weird turn and the suspension is all cranked up. You can run out of steering force, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because that's a very odd occurrence. As long as you're paying attention with your lockers, whether or not you're using front drive, front dig or not, a few other factors, it's a pretty minimal issue. And the upside of not running assist in my opinion, is you get a much, much better road driving experience. Every hydraulic assist system that I have either built myself or ridden and driven in other vehicles is the hydraulic assist ram changes the way the steering feels in a negative way on the road. I'm not saying that there aren't systems out there that might work okay, but in my opinion, for what I wanted to do with this vehicle, it was not worth going that far yet. And I'm actually happy that I haven't. I really enjoy the way this thing is driving with the big box. And I still have, I still can do an upgraded pump. So I don't know the exact numbers, but the stock pump puts out probably, I would say, in the 12 to 1300 PSI range when they're new and good and everything. You can get an aftermarket pump that will do 1700, almost 1800 PSI. So that's quite a large increase in performance just with a bigger pump, or a more powerful pump, I should say. And I will probably do that along with a power steering cooler long before I go to a assist ram. An assist ram is my absolute last choice. I know that's going to make some people upset, or might get a couple arguments about that, but I have vehicles that have assist steering. It's not that I don't know what they feel like. It's just not something I like. I don't like giving up the road driving for very few situations on the trail for me. So maybe somebody will come up with something new that's like, low friction seals in the assist ram. Smaller assist rams, I think, would actually help some of these problems. You could even do an assist ram that you could turn on and off somehow, like that bypassed maybe or something. Different servo valves that could better support it, torsion bar changes in the servo valve that would help with the feel. There is a lot of things there that you could still do. I just want the simplest system I can get. So for steering, the big bore, big sector shaft box for me is where it's at right now, and I'm very happy with that. Yeah, I think that's about the last of the Tour de Jeep. There's a lot of things, like littler things, that I haven't really mentioned probably, that I should go through quickly. Terraflex, on the engine, Terraflex has a PCV valve modification kit that functions similar or better, in my opinion, to a typical catch can. So one of the shortfalls with the 3.6 engine is when you get them up on steeps or drops or weird angles, sometimes the oil can pool in the valve covers and intake stuff weirdly and cause a lot of smoke, and even go as far as to hydrolock the engine. So I did that upgrade. It was a very nice kit from Terraflex, a little cramped in this engine bay, but yeah, putting it on really, really steep stuff in Sand Hollow, up, down, sideways, whatever, never had any smoke issues. So that was a big win. Little things like grab handles and my cell phone mount, and these little storage solutions. There's a company, I can't remember their name. I will put a link in the bottom here if I can find them again, but a couple people make them. But basically they're new the straps for the doors where they hook into, a company makes a different offset of that strap, so it lets the doors open further, and so getting in and out of the Jeep or getting stuff in and out of the Jeep is a lot easier. The noise has been a factor in how I've built a lot of this Jeep, and tire selection, trying to keep it nice on the highway. And I did end up adding, I don't know if you can see it in the video. Yeah, you can. So this insulation and sound kit from DEI is a glue-on. It's adhesive foam that's noise control with some nice. I tried to use the white version because the top is white and makes it feel a little bit more open and airy in the Jeep, and it really did help with noise on the highway. It was just like turning the volume knob down on everything a little bit. I will probably go through and add some sound deadening underneath the carpet, maybe some more thermal protection. Overall, the DEI really helped with the AC effectiveness. I can kind of go down a couple clicks on the air conditioning. Seems to keep up better now, and yeah, that's my brain dump on building this Jeep. I'm guessing this video is dang near got to be 2 hours of me babbling. I'm sure not very many people are going to make it this far in the video, and if you have sat here and listened to me babble for over an hour, thank you, and thank you for checking out the Brennan's Garage YouTube channel, where I can host this long format style stuff. I may try something different, like doing since this was basically just me talking, I could make this into kind of a podcast type setup, where somebody could just listen to me talk about the project, and you'd probably pick up some fairly helpful information. And yeah, thank you for following along. If you want to be notified of when I do upload videos, I'm not a really super regular content poster on YouTube. I'm trying to get better at that, but for me, it's not really the greatest format for me. So, definitely subscribe to the channel if you can. There's a bell you can click for notifications when I do upload something. And then, of course, I guess where I post the most daily stuff is my Facebook page for Brennan's Garage, along with my Instagram. I should be fairly easy to find either one of those. If you have any questions or comments, or you would like to debate a topic on this video, please leave a comment below. I'm always happy to have a civil adult debate with anybody, and hopefully we both learn something. But yeah, I'm always open for that, and good comments seem to drive the algorithm and makes everything good. If you would like to have a more leaving a comment on YouTube, I am limited with how I can react or interact with you. I can only post a text reply. So another avenue for that is on Facebook. I will probably have something about this video posted to, draw people to YouTube to watch it, of course. But the one bonus about Facebook is in the comments, if you want to talk about something, I can also post pictures and even short video clips in the comments section. And so sometimes that's a little bit easier or better way to interact with people, with you guys. So thank you again for watching, and maybe go build yourself a new Jeep and try something different and learn something new. And just don't do yellow wheels and stuff, because then there'll be another Jeep with yellow wheels and all that. No, I'm just kidding. You do whatever you want. And thank you again, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.